This is statistically impossible, I muttered, aggressively tapping my pen against my desk at 3 a.m. I was taking a break from auditing a massive dataset by reading a highly rated, but logically flawed, historical romance web novel titled The General's Weeping Petal. The protagonist, Lin Yao, was a tragic figure, forced into an arranged marriage with the empire's most feared military commander, General Wei Chun. Her entire existence revolved around crying into silk handkerchiefs and trying to win the heart of a man who openly despised her. I went to sleep drafting a mental spreadsheet on how much money she could have made if she'd just embezzled his estate funds and fled to the Jiangnan water towns. Then I woke up, not at my ergonomic desk, but lying on a carved mahogany bed draped in layers of heavy, crimson silk. The air smelled of sandalwood incense, and outside the lattice windows, a bamboo wind chime clinked softly. I sat up, a massive, elaborate gold hairpin instantly pulling at my scalp. I looked down at my hands. They were uncalloused, adorned with jade rings, and draped in the sweeping sleeves of a hanfu robe. Before my analytical brain could fully process the fact that I had just transmigrated into the exact historical melodrama I had been roasting, the intricately carved wooden doors slid open. In strode a man who looked like he had been sculpted out of jade and ice. He wore dark, silver-threaded martial robes, his black hair tied back in a strict guan. His jawline was sharp enough to slice through a melon, and his dark eyes radiated absolute zero temperature. General Wei Chun. He didn't greet me. He simply walked to the center of the room and tossed a bamboo scroll onto the low tea table. The wedding is complete, as the emperor commanded, Wei Chun said, his voice entirely devoid of inflection. But do not mistake this for a real marriage, Lin Yao. I have no time for your political games or your courtyard scheming. You will be relocated to the western courtyard. You will be provided with basic rations. Do not seek me out. In the novel, this is the exact moment Lin Yao falls to her knees, sobbing and begging for a single drop of his affection. I stared at the bamboo scroll. Then I looked around the lavish, antique-filled room. The western courtyard. I repeated, my voice steady, though my new vocal cords felt strangely delicate. Just to clarify, General, I am being permanently relegated to a remote section of the estate with zero oversight regarding my daily activities. Wei Chun frowned, clearly thrown by the lack of weeping. Yes, you are confined there. Excellent, I said smoothly, sliding out of the bed and adjusting my ridiculously heavy silk sleeves. And regarding these basic rations, as your legally wedded principal wife, the imperial tax code dictates I am entitled to a monthly stipend of at least 50 silver taels, regardless of my residential status within the compound. I expect it delivered on the first of every lunar month. Furthermore, I'll need an abacus, a premium inkstone, and complete access to the estate's logistical supply ledgers. The terrifying, battle-hardened general stared at me as if I had just spoken to him in a demonic tongue. You want an abacus? He repeated slowly. I need something to do while I'm banished, I reasoned, walking past him to inspect a very expensive-looking celadone vase. If I am going to live in the cold palace, I am going to make it profitable. I assume we have a mutual understanding regarding an eventual contract dissolution. A contract dissolution, Wei Chun echoed, his icy facade cracking into pure bewilderment. A divorce, General, I clarified, offering him a sharp, thoroughly unsubmissive smile. Give me a year to optimize this estate's catastrophic supply chain. Pay me a generous severance package, and I will vanish from your life forever. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to go pack my jade. I have a courtyard to renovate. I picked up the bamboo scroll, stepped around the stunned military commander, and confidently marched out the door to start my hostile takeover of ancient China. Chapter 1. The western courtyard of the Wei estate was exactly what one would expect from a place colloquially known as the Cold Palace. When the two heavily armored guards shoved the creaking, rotting wooden doors open, and left me inside with my single trunk of belongings, a cloud of dust plumed into the air, causing a nearby flock of pigeons to scatter. The courtyard was a masterclass in structural neglect. Weeds choked the stone pathways, the paper screens on the sliding doors were torn, and a single, dramatically drooping willow tree sat in the center of the overgrown garden, practically begging a tragic heroine to hang herself from it. I dropped my heavy silk sleeves and put my hands on my hips, surveying the perimeter. This isn't a banishment, I muttered, calculating the square footage. This is a severe property code violation. According to the web novel, The original Lin Yao spent her first week in this courtyard kneeling in the dirt, weeping until her eyes bled, and refusing to eat anything except plain white rice. Her dramatic suffering was supposed to make General Wei Chun feel a twinge of guilt. Spoiler, it didn't. He just thought she was annoying. I, however, had spent the last 5 years of my life turning around failing tech startups. I didn't see a tragic prison. I saw a distressed asset with excellent privacy, zero managerial oversight, and massive potential for a hostile glow-up. I turned my attention to the front porch of the main sleeping quarters. Lounging on the dusty wooden steps were 2 servants, a maid and a young eunuch. They were currently cracking roasted sunflower seeds between their teeth and spitting the shells directly onto the walkway. They barely looked up when I approached. "Greetings, madam," the maid said, her tone dripping with bored insolence. "I am Cui and this is Bao. The general sent us to serve you. I'll show you to the bed so you can begin your weeping. Try to keep the wailing down after sundown. Bao needs his sleep." I stopped at the base of the steps. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a fit. I just tapped my jade-ringed finger against my chin and looked at them with the exact same deadpan, soul-crushing stare I used on junior analysts who messed up their pivot tables. "Cui and Bao," I repeated, my voice crisp and entirely devoid of the expected hysteria. "Stand up." They blinked. Bao stopped chewing his sunflower seed. The absolute lack of tears on my face was clearly throwing a wrench into their afternoon schedule. Slowly, almost reluctantly, they stood up, dusting off their coarse robes. "Listen to me very carefully," I said, stepping up onto the porch so I was at eye level with them. "This courtyard is no longer a dumping ground for the general's unwanted baggage. It is now my corporate headquarters. And as of this exact second, you two are on a highly unpaid performance improvement plan." Cui exchanged a bewildered look with Bao. "A performance what?" "You have exactly 1 hour to execute a full sweep of this primary structure," I ordered, ignoring her question. "I want the cobwebs removed, the floors swept, and those torn paper screens replaced. Bao, you are on landscaping duty. Rip out every weed within a 10-yard radius of that depressing willow tree. If I see a single sunflower seed shell on this walkway when I return, I will personally sell you both to the copper mines to recoup my administrative costs. Are we understood?" Bao swallowed hard, suddenly looking very pale. The rumors of Lin Yao being a weak, pathetic flower were instantly evaporating before their eyes. "Ijis, Mathim." "Excellent. Now where is the main supply depot?" I asked, smoothing the front of my embroidered robes. "I need to requisition some office supplies." Half an hour later, I was standing in the estate's primary logistics pavilion. It was a massive, bustling hub of activity where stewards tracked the food, weapons, and silver flowing into the military compound. The head steward, an older, balding man named Master Wang, nearly dropped his ink brush when I marched right past his guards and slammed my hands down on his accounting desk. "Madam Lin," Master Wang gasped, scrambling to his feet and bowing awkwardly. You are not supposed to leave the western courtyard. The general's orders." "The general ordered me confined to the courtyard for residential purposes, Wang. He did not revoke my requisition clearance as the legal matriarch of this estate," I interrupted smoothly. "And frankly, my residential purposes require infrastructure. I need a solid oak desk, 3 premium Anhui inkstones, 50 sheets of high-grade rice paper, and a suan pan." Master Wang blinked rapidly, his brain struggling to process the request. "A suan pan? An abacus? Madam, what use do you have for an abacus? Are you planning to count your tears?" I leaned across the wooden desk, my eyes locking onto his. "Wang, if you don't have an abacus delivered to my courtyard by sundown, I will start counting the discrepancies in your grain ledgers. And based on the sheer volume of dust on those bamboo scrolls behind you, I am guessing I'll find a lot of them." Master Wang turned the color of old parchment. "A desk and an abacus right away, madam," he squeaked. "And a pot of your strongest green tea," I added cheerfully, turning on my heel to walk back to my newly acquired fixer-upper. I have a very long night of restructuring ahead of me. Chapter 2. By midnight, the western courtyard had been entirely transformed. The cobwebs were gone, the floors were swept clean enough to eat off, and the paper screens were pristine. Cui and Bao were currently huddled in the corner of the porch, looking at me with a mixture of profound exhaustion and deep, primal fear. I was sitting cross-legged at my newly acquired solid oak desk, illuminated by 3 oil lamps. In front of me was a stack of blank rice paper, a freshly ground Anhui inkstone, and a beautifully crafted rosewood abacus. But I had a problem. I had no data. If I was going to secure a massive divorce settlement to fund my early retirement, I needed to know exactly how much liquid capital this estate possessed, which meant I needed the ledgers. I looked up at the trembling eunuch. Bow! He flinched, nearly dropping his broom. Ijis, Madam Zhao. Go to the main logistics pavilion. Tell Master Wang that I require the estate's financial records for the last 3 fiscal quarters. Specifically, the military grain expenditures, the internal silk budgets, and the tax remittances. If he refuses, tell him I am legally authorized to request an imperial audit of his discretionary spending. Bao swallowed hard, bowed, and sprinted off into the dark. 20 minutes later, a highly panicked Master Wang arrived at my courtyard, trailing 2 massive wooden carts overflowing with heavy, dusty bamboo scrolls. Madam, Master Wang wheezed, wiping sweat from his balding forehead. These are the principal household records. But they are incredibly complex. It takes my team of 5 scholars a full month to balance the seasonal grain tax alone. You cannot possibly expect to. Leave the carts, Wang, I interrupted, unrolling my first sheet of rice paper. I picked up my calligraphy brush, holding it not like a delicate artist, but like a weapon. And tell your scholars they are vastly overpaid. Wang opened his mouth to argue, saw the absolute, terrifying focus in my eyes, and wisely decided to retreat. Once I was alone, I pulled the first bamboo scroll from the cart. I untied the leather binding and rolled it open across the desk. Ancient Chinese accounting was, to put it mildly, a logistical nightmare. It was a single entry system, written vertically, with absolutely no standardization of units. There was no distinction between capital expenditures and operational costs. It was just a massive, running list of things the estate bought and sold. Barbaric, I whispered in horror. I dipped my brush into the ink and quickly drew a massive grid across my rice paper. Asset, liability, equity, revenue, expense. I was about to introduce double-entry bookkeeping to the Wei dynasty. For the next 6 hours, the only sound in the western courtyard was the frantic, rhythmic clack-clack-clack of my rosewood abacus beads and the scratching of my brush. I drank 4 pots of highly caffeinated green tea. I didn't cry over my loveless marriage. I didn't look out at the moon and pine for the general. I audited the hell out of his estate. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pale pink and gold, I finally set my brush down. My hands were covered in black ink, and my neck was stiff, but my spreadsheet was complete. I stared at the numbers, letting out a long, slow exhale. General Wei Chun was a military genius. He had conquered 3 northern territories and secured the emperor's borders. He was also, financially speaking, an absolute idiot. The estate was hemorrhaging silver at a catastrophic rate. Based on my calculations, they were purchasing military grain rations from a merchant guild down south at premium retail prices, rather than negotiating a wholesale contract. Worse, they were shipping that grain through the imperial canal system, and paying a ridiculous 30% toll fee at every single checkpoint, completely ignoring a free, untolled overland route that would only add 2 days to the supply chain. On top of that, the internal household budget was a disaster. The estate was spending thousands of taels a month importing rare southern silks for the concubines and female relatives, while simultaneously throwing away perfectly good, slightly out-of-season fabrics instead of recycling them, or selling them back to the merchant class at a discount. If this burn rate continued, the mighty Wei military estate would be completely insolvent in less than 18 months. And if the estate went broke, there would be no money for my severance package. Absolutely unacceptable, I muttered, aggressively circling a massive deficit in red ink. I couldn't just sit in the cold palace and wait for a divorce. I had to step in. I had to restructure this entire compound, save the general from his own horrific supply chain management, and demand a 20% cut of the gross savings as my exit fee. I rolled up my spreadsheet, tied it with a silk ribbon, and stood up, my joints popping. Kui! I barked. The maid, who had fallen asleep sitting up against a pillar, jolted awake. Madam, draw a bath, fetch my most intimidating set of robes, and tell the kitchen I require a high-protein breakfast, I ordered, picking up my abacus and tucking it securely under my arm. Then, find out where the general is holding his morning briefings. I have a budget proposal to submit. Chapter 3. General Wei Chen sat at the head of a massive, carved obsidian war table in the estate's primary command pavilion. Spread out before him were topographical maps of the northern border, troop deployment markers, and 3 highly decorated military lieutenants. He was a man who thrived on order, discipline, and absolute control, which was why the current report from his elite shadow guard, MO, was giving him a severe headache. "Repeat that," Wei Chen commanded, pinching the bridge of his nose. MO, a highly trained assassin who usually reported on enemy troop movements, knelt on the bamboo matting, looking profoundly uncomfortable. "The Madam General. She has not wept. Not once." Wei Chen frowned. The political spy he had been forced to marry was supposed to be a fragile, emotional creature. Then what is she doing in the western courtyard? "She is clicking, sir." "Clicking?" "Yes, General. Violently. With a wooden counting tool. She stayed awake the entire night, drinking copious amounts of concentrated green tea and drawing strange, box grids on rice paper. She also threatened to sell her assigned servants to the copper mines if they didn't weed the garden. And she completely terrified Master Wang into surrendering the primary household ledgers." The 3 lieutenants at the table exchanged bewildered glances. Wei Chen's frown deepened. "She requisitioned the ledgers? She is a nobleman's sheltered daughter. She doesn't even know how to read a tax report." Before MO could respond, the heavy wooden doors of the command pavilion were unceremoniously shoved open. The lieutenants instantly reached for their swords. Wei Chen's hand dropped to the hilt of his blade. Striding through the doorway wasn't a weeping, tragic bride in delicate pastels. It was Lin Yao. She was wearing a tailored, dark plum martial robe with silver embroidery, the ancient equivalent of a ruthless power suit. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, no-nonsense knot secured by a single jade pin. Tucked firmly under her left arm was a rosewood abacus. "General," I said crisply, marching straight up to the obsidian war table. Wei Chen stared at me, his hand still resting on his sword. "Lin Yao, you are strictly forbidden from entering the command pavilion. Return to your courtyard immediately." "I would love nothing more than to return to my courtyard, General, but unfortunately, your logistics department is a catastrophic failure, and I refuse to let my future severance package go bankrupt," I replied, pulling my rolled-up spreadsheet from my sleeve and slapping it directly on top of his topographical map of the northern border. "Your severance what?" Wei Chen asked, completely derailed by the vocabulary. "Your money, General. You are bleeding silver," I clarified, unrolling the rice paper and pinning the corners down with 2 carved wooden troop markers. The 3 lieutenants leaned in, expecting to see a hastily scribbled, tear-stained poem begging for his affection. Instead, they saw a flawlessly executed double-entry accounting grid. "Look at this," I ordered, tapping the tip of my calligraphy brush against a column of red ink. "You are purchasing your military grain rations from the Azure Dragon Merchant Guild in the south. You are shipping it up the Grand Canal and paying a 30% imperial toll fee at 4 separate waterway checkpoints. The canal is the safest route for military supplies," Wei Chen stated, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the math. He was a brilliant tactician, but he was entirely out of his depth. "The canal is a tourist trap for your supply chain," I corrected sharply. "If you pivot the shipments to the overland route through the Hashi corridor, you avoid the imperial tolls entirely. Yes, you have to pay a hazard fee to the mercenary escorts, but that cost is static. The toll fees compound based on weight. By switching to the overland route, you will reduce your quartermaster deficit by 42%. The pavilion went completely silent. One of the lieutenants, the quartermaster, actually did the mental math in his head. His eyes widened in sheer horror as he realized the woman in the plum robes was entirely correct. Wei Chen stared at the grid. Then he looked up at me. The icy, indifferent glare he usually reserved for his political enemies was completely gone, replaced by a dark, intense fascination. "Where did you learn to calculate compound logistics?" Wei Chen asked slowly, his deep voice rumbling in the quiet room. "I have a very particular set of skills, General. Skills that make me a nightmare for corrupt merchants and lazy stewards," I replied, crossing my arms. "I also audited your internal silk budget. Your concubines are expensing premium fabrics at a highly suspicious markup. I'm freezing their discretionary spending until I can conduct a full inventory check." "You are freezing my concubines' stipends," Wei Chen repeated. He didn't sound angry. He sounded entirely mesmerized. It's basic overhead reduction, I said dismissively. I tapped the abacus under my arm. Now here is my proposal. I will restructure your entire supply chain. I will balance these ledgers, eliminate the corruption in your staff, and turn this estate into a highly profitable enterprise. And in return? Wei Chen asked, leaning forward over the table, entirely invading my personal space. His dark eyes were locked onto mine. He was waiting for the catch. He was waiting for me to ask for his love, or his time, or a place in his bed. In return, I stated, completely unfazed by his intimidating proximity, I want 20% of the gross savings I generate, paid in solid silver taels, which I will take with me when we mutually dissolve this marriage contract next spring. Wei Chen froze. Dissolve the contract. Divorce, General, I said brightly, stepping back from the table. You get a fully funded army and a clean ledger. I get early retirement in Jiangnan. It's a win-win corporate merger. I'll draft the paperwork for your signature by tomorrow. Have a highly productive day, gentlemen. I turned on my heel and marched out of the command pavilion, leaving the Empire's most terrifying military commander staring at my retreating back, utterly and completely obsessed. Chapter 4. Within 2 weeks, the Western Courtyard went from being a dilapidated prison to the most terrifyingly efficient administrative hub in the entire Wei estate. I had essentially turned the terrified Master Wang and his 5 scholars into my junior accounting interns. Every morning at dawn, they delivered the daily expenditure reports to my porch. If there was a single calculation error, I handed the scroll back with a red circle and a deeply disappointed sigh that made grown men tremble. Bao, the eunuch, had been promoted to my executive assistant, managing my calendar and brewing my highly caffeinated tea. Chui, the maid, was now my head of physical security, aggressively guarding the courtyard doors from nosy concubines whose stipends I had unceremoniously frozen. I was sitting at my oak desk, reviewing the updated grain ledgers, when the tranquility of my corporate sanctuary was shattered. From the main compound, the deep, resonant boom of the estate's war drum echoed through the air. It was the signal for a level 1 military emergency. Bow, I said, not looking up from my abacus. Go find out why the general is making that horrific noise. It's disrupting my workflow. Bao sprinted out the gates and returned 10 minutes later, completely out of breath and pale as a ghost. Madam Yao, he gasped, leaning heavily against the porch pillar. It's a disaster. A severe drought has struck the Central Plains. The Imperial Ministry of Revenue just issued an emergency decree embargoing all grain shipments to the Northern Territories. They claim the capital needs the reserves, but the Minister of Revenue is a political rival of the general, and he is using a natural disaster to intentionally starve Wei Chen's army and weaken his power base. I finished smoothly, connecting the political dots. A classic, albeit highly unethical, monopoly tactic. The general is furious, Bao whimpered. He has ordered his elite cavalry to saddle up. He is putting on his heavy armor. He plans to ride to the capital and hold the Minister of Revenue at sword point until the embargo is lifted. I pinched the bridge of my nose, letting out a heavy sigh. Men. So dramatic. So entirely lacking in strategic foresight. Chui, get my cloak. I have to go stop a PR nightmare. I marched across the estate, the heavy plum silk of my robes sweeping across the stone paths, and pushed open the doors to the main courtyard. It was absolute chaos. Soldiers were saddling war horses, armor was clanking, and in the center of it all stood General Wei Chen. He was clad in terrifying dark iron scale armor, his black cloak billowing in the wind. He looked like the god of war himself, practically radiating a murderous, icy fury. He gripped the hilt of his broadsword, turning to mount his massive black warhorse. General, I called out, my voice easily cutting through the chaos. Wei Chen froze. He turned his head, his dark eyes locking onto me. The murderous fury in his expression faltered for a fraction of a second, replaced by that familiar, intense fascination. Lin Yao, he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. Go back to your courtyard. This is a military crisis. The capital has cut our supply lines. I am aware, I said, walking right past his heavily armed guards and stopping directly in front of his warhorse. Put the sword away, General. Murdering the Minister of Revenue is a severe breach of imperial law, and the resulting treason trial will absolutely tank our quarterly margins. My men will starve in a month. Wei Chen snarled, leaning down toward me. The sheer physical intimidation of the man was staggering, but I had successfully negotiated severance packages with Wall Street billionaires. A man in ancient iron armor wasn't going to make me blink. No, they won't, I said calmly, pulling a neatly tied bamboo scroll from my sleeve and holding it up to him. Because relying on a single, politically compromised supplier for your most critical asset is amateur hour. Anticipating political bottlenecks is basic supply chain risk management. Wei Chen frowned, staring at the scroll. He didn't take it. What is that? It is a portfolio of forward contracts, I explained. Seeing his blank expression, I translated into ancient terms. 2 weeks ago, when I audited your ledgers, I noticed the imperial grain supply was entirely dependent on the Minister of Revenue's goodwill. That is a single point of failure. So I took the silver I saved by cutting your concubine's silk budgets and freezing the estate's luxury expenditures, and I quietly sent merchants to the independent farmers in the southern Jiangnan water towns. The entire courtyard went dead silent. The soldiers had stopped saddling their horses. I bought their autumn harvest in advance, at a fixed pre-drought wholesale price, I continued, tapping the scroll against my palm. And because I already rerouted your logistics to the overland Hushi corridor to avoid the canal tolls, the grain is currently moving via private mercenary caravans, entirely bypassing the imperial embargo. Your army will have a 6-month surplus arriving at the northern border in exactly 4 days. Wei Chen stared at me. He looked at his broadsword. He looked at his warhorse. Then he looked down at the woman who had just outmaneuvered the entire imperial court using nothing but a budget surplus and an abacus. You bought grain that hasn't been harvested yet. Wei Chen breathed, his icy composure completely shattering into pure, unadulterated awe. Before the drought even happened? It's called hedging your bets, General. Buy low, sell high, and never trust a government monopoly, I said, finally shoving the scroll into his armored chest. He caught it instinctively. Now please tell your men to stand down. The noise is giving me a migraine, and I need to get back to the western courtyard. I'm currently calculating the depreciation of your armory. I turned on my heel to leave, but before I could take a step, a heavy, gauntlet hand gently but firmly caught my wrist. I looked back. Wei Chen had dismounted his horse. He was standing entirely too close, towering over me, his dark eyes burning with an intensity that made the breath catch in my throat. The 20%, Wei Chen said, his voice dropping an octave. Excuse me? I asked, my heart doing a highly illogical flutter against my ribs. The contract you proposed 2 weeks ago, the terrifying general murmured, his thumb lightly brushing the inside of my wrist. I will sign it. 20% of all savings. Whatever you need, Lin Yao. The estate is yours to command. I offered him a sharp, victorious smile, gently pulling my wrist from his grasp. I'll have Bao bring the paperwork to your study by sundown, General. Pleasure doing business with you. Chapter 5. General Wei Chen's private study was an intimidating, hyper-masculine fortress of dark mahogany, weapons mounted on the walls, and the heavy scent of sandalwood. When I walked in exactly at sundown, Bao trailing behind me carrying a stack of freshly inked bamboo scrolls, Wei Chen was sitting behind his massive desk. He was out of his terrifying armor, wearing a relaxed, dark silk robe that hung loosely across his broad shoulders. I stopped in front of the desk, snapping my fingers. Bao quickly set the scrolls down and scurried out of the room, closing the heavy doors behind him to leave us alone. The contracts, General, I announced, tapping the top scroll. I've drafted them in triplicate. 1 for your records, 1 for mine, and 1 to be filed with an independent notary in the capital, just in case you suffer a sudden case of amnesia regarding my 20% cut. Wei Chen didn't look at the scrolls. He looked at me. Without a word, he reached under his desk and pulled out a beautifully carved lacquered wooden box. He slid it across the polished surface until it rested right next to my meticulously drafted severance agreement. He popped the bronze latch and opened the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of black velvet, was a small fortune in jewelry. There were hairpin ornaments made of pure, spun gold, massive teardrop emerald earrings, and a jade bangle so translucent and green it looked like frozen water. In the web novel, this was the exact box of jewels he gave to his favored concubines as a reward for their obedience. I stared down at the box. You saved my army today, Lin Yao, Wei Chen said, his deep voice carrying a strange, almost hesitant softness that I had never heard before. The grain caravans are already reporting in. My lieutenants are calling you a tactical genius. I know I said I would sign your contract, but a woman of your station. You shouldn't have to concern yourself with silver and merchant trades. Take the jewels. They are yours. I looked at the gold hairpins. I looked at the emeralds. I engaged my mental calculator. Highly illiquid assets. Terrible resale value on the secondary market due to the custom imperial engravings. At least a 40% depreciation the moment I walk out of the compound with them. I reached out and gently closed the lid of the box, pushing it back across the desk toward him. I appreciate the gesture, General, but I am going to have to decline the bonus, I said smoothly. Wei Chen's dark eyebrows pulled together in genuine confusion. You are refusing Imperial Jade? Why? Does the craftsmanship displease you? I can have the estate jeweler craft something else. The craftsmanship is lovely, General, but jewelry is a depreciating asset, I explained, leaning over the desk and resting my hands flat on the wood. I can't use gold hairpins to buy a shipping fleet, and I can't pay mercenary guards with emerald earrings. I need liquid capital. I need silver. Which brings us to the contract. I pulled the top scroll toward me and unrolled it, completely ignoring his baffled expression. Clause 1. The performance bonus. I read aloud, tracing the vertical characters with my finger. I receive 20% of all gross savings generated by my restructuring of the estate's supply chain, paid directly into a private, untraceable account under the Azure Dragon Merchant Guild. Wei Chen stared at the scroll, still entirely thrown by my rejection of the jewels. Fine. Clause 2. Managerial autonomy. I have absolute authority over the estate's ledgers, hiring and firing. If Master Wang questions my math again, I am legally permitted to fire him out of a catapult. I will personally load the catapult, Wei Chen agreed, a faint, deeply amused smirk finally breaking through his stoic mask. Excellent. Now the most important part, I said, flipping to the end of the scroll. Clause 4. The golden parachute. Or in this dynasty's terms, the mutual dissolution of marriage. The amusement vanished from Wei Chen's face instantly. I have already drafted the letter of repudiation, I continued, oblivious to the sudden, icy drop in the room's temperature. According to imperial law, a husband can divorce a wife for talkativeness or lack of filial piety. Feel free to cite my aggressive accounting practices as grounds for dismissal. Once my 20% cut reaches 100,000 silver taels, this contract triggers automatically. You sign the divorce paper, I take my silver, and I relocate to the Jiangnan provinces to start a silk monopoly. We never have to see each other again. I picked up an ink brush, dipped it in the inkstone, and held it out to him. Sign at the bottom, General. Wei Chen did not take the brush. He stared at the clause dictating our divorce. His jaw ticked, the muscles jumping under his pale skin. He looked up at me, his dark eyes entirely unreadable, though a dangerous storm seemed to be brewing behind them. You are entirely serious, Wei Chen murmured. You truly want to leave this estate. You don't want the title of principal wife. You don't want my favor. You just want the silver. General, your favor doesn't compound interest, I pointed out practically. I am a businesswoman. This marriage was a hostile political merger forced upon both of us by the Emperor. I am simply optimizing our exit strategy. Wei Chen slowly stood up. The sheer size of him was overwhelming in the quiet study. He didn't take the brush from my hand. Instead, his large, warm hand wrapped completely over mine, guiding my hand, and the brush, down to the bamboo scroll. I will sign your contract, Lin Yao, he said, his voice a low, vibrating hum that sent a highly unprofessional shiver down my spine. You will have your 20%. You will have your absolute authority. He pressed the brush to the bamboo, his hand still covering mine, and signed his name with a sharp, aggressive flourish. He let go of my hand, but he didn't step back. He leaned over the desk, his face inches from mine, his icy eyes burning with a dark, territorial heat that was entirely absent from the original novel's plotline. But understand this, Wei Chen whispered, his gaze dropping briefly to my lips before locking back onto my eyes. I am a military commander. I do not surrender my assets easily. If you want to leave this estate, you are going to have to outmaneuver me. My heart did a frantic, terrifying leap against my ribs. I had successfully secured my severance package, but looking into the eyes of the ruthless general, I suddenly realized I had severely miscalculated the risk of him actually wanting me to stay. Chapter 6. The Imperial Palace was a logistical nightmare masquerading as a display of divine prosperity. As Wei Chun and I were escorted through the towering red gates and into the Grand Hall of Supreme Harmony, my accountant brain immediately went into overdrive. I looked at the gold leaf pillars, the hundreds of silk lanterns burning premium whale oil, and the ridiculous volume of exotic peacock feathers decorating the emperor's dais. The overhead costs alone could fund a 3-year military campaign, I thought, suppressing a shudder of sheer financial disgust. Their burn rate is astronomical. I was seated next to Wei Chun at a low, lacquered table near the front of the hall, a position of high honor reflecting his status as the Empire's supreme military commander. I was wearing my formal matriarch attire, a heavy, obsidian black silk robe embroidered with silver cranes, my hair pinned up in a severe, complex style that doubled as a structural engineering marvel. Wei Chun, seated beside me in dark, silver-threaded court robes, noticed my critical gaze. "Is the seating arrangement displeasing to you?" he murmured, leaning closer so his voice wouldn't carry over the traditional lute music playing in the background. "The seating is fine. It's the imperial budget that displeases me," I whispered back, taking a sip of my wine. "I've counted 42 imported southern pearls on the chief eunuch's hat alone. This administration is completely over-leveraged." Wei Chun let out a soft, breathy huff of amusement, his eyes gleaming. "Do try to refrain from auditing the emperor, Lin Yao. It is generally considered treason." Before I could assure him that I only audited people who paid me, a sudden hush fell over the banquet hall. The emperor, a middle-aged man dripping in yellow silk, raised his golden goblet. "To General Wei Chun, for securing our northern borders and miraculously keeping our troops fed during this tragic drought." The nobles raised their cups, but the tension in the room was palpable. I noticed one man in particular, a portly, sweating official seated across the aisle, glaring at me with absolute venom. "Who is the angry dumpling in the green robes?" I muttered to Wei Chun. "Lord Shun, the Minister of Revenue." Wei Chun replied smoothly, his own gaze turning icy as he looked at the man. "The one who initiated the grain embargo. He is highly displeased that you bypassed his monopoly and publicly humiliated his office." Right on cue, Lord Shun stood up, bowing deeply to the emperor. "Your Majesty," Lord Shun said, his voice dripping with false humility, "we are indeed blessed by the general's military prowess. But surely, such a legendary man requires a refined and cultured household to return to. I have heard rumors that his new wife, Lady Lin Yao, has been locked away in the western courtyard, neglecting the traditional feminine arts entirely." A titter of mocking laughter rippled through the wives and concubines seated behind him. "In the spirit of tonight's celebration," Lord Shun continued, turning his venomous smile toward me, "perhaps Lady Lin Yao would honor us by composing a poem on the Empire's grand prosperity? Unless, of course, the rumors are true, and she lacks the intellect for imperial verse." In the original novel, the minister's daughter challenges Lin Yao to this exact poetry contest. Lin Yao stutters, cries, and embarrasses Wei Chun so thoroughly that he leaves the banquet without her. I set my wine cup down. The ceramic clink echoed sharply in the quiet hall. Wei Chun's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist under the table. "Yao, you do not have to engage him. I will handle this." "Stand down, General," I whispered, smoothly slipping my hand from his grasp. "I'm about to handle his tax returns." I stood up, adjusting my sweeping black sleeves, and offered the emperor a flawless, mathematically precise bow. "Your Majesty, Lord Shun is correct. I am a practical woman, not a poet." I projected my voice, ensuring it carried to the very back of the grand hall. "However, I can absolutely speak to the Empire's grand prosperity. In fact, let us compose a verse regarding the autumn tax yield from the Jiangnan provinces." Lord Shun's smug smile faltered. "As we all know, the Jiangnan water towns are the Empire's economic heart," I began, pacing slowly in front of my table. "According to the public imperial decree issued by Lord Shun last month, the region suffered a 20% decrease in agricultural output due to the drought, resulting in a reported tax remittance of only 800,000 silver taels." I tapped my chin, looking up at the painted ceiling as if searching for a rhyme. "And yet," I continued, my voice dropping into a crisp, razor-sharp cadence, "when my private merchants purchased the general's military grain in Jiangnan 3 weeks ago, the independent farmers reported a record surplus. Furthermore, the provincial ledger of the Grand Canal lock keepers, which is entirely public information if one bothers to do the math, shows that 4,000 merchant barges passed through the southern checkpoints last month. If we apply the standard imperial tariff of 10% per barge capacity. Lord Shen turned the color of spoiled milk. Your Majesty, this is absurd. She is spouting nonsense. It means the actual tax revenue generated by the Jiangnan provinces was closer to 1.4 million silver taels. I finished, locking eyes with the sweating minister, which leaves a discrepancy of 600,000 silver taels. A very poetic sum, Lord Shen. I wonder, does it rhyme with the 3 new private estates you recently purchased in the capital? The grand hall descended into a deathly, paralyzing silence. The lute players had stopped entirely. The emperor lowered his golden goblet, his eyes narrowing dangerously as he looked at his minister of revenue. Lord Shen, is there a discrepancy in the imperial ledgers? And no, Your Majesty, the woman is mad. She is a mere courtyard wife. She knows nothing of imperial logistics. Lord Shen stammered, falling to his knees in sheer terror. I didn't blink. I just looked at the emperor. Your Majesty, give me 3 junior accountants and access to his ministry's archives, and I will find your missing 600,000 taels by tomorrow afternoon. I only charge a 5% finder's fee. The emperor stared at me, completely astounded. Then a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. Guards, escort Lord Shen to the Ministry of Justice for an immediate, comprehensive audit. As the screaming Minister of Revenue was dragged out of the banquet hall by armored guards, the rival concubines and noblewomen who had been laughing at me a moment ago were now staring at the floor, absolutely petrified. I smoothed my black silk robes, calmly sat back down on my cushion, and picked up my wine cup. Wei Chen was staring at me. He hadn't moved a muscle. He looked like a man who had just witnessed a deity descend from the heavens to smite his enemies with a spreadsheet. Slowly, deliberately, the fearsome general picked up the silver wine carafe and refilled my cup, his dark eyes burning with absolute, unconditional reverence. You didn't even use the abacus, Wei Chen murmured, his voice thick with awe. Mental math, General, I replied, taking a sip. It's highly efficient. Now pass the roasted duck. Sabotaging corrupt officials always makes me hungry. Chapter 7. The aftermath of the imperial banquet was highly lucrative. True to my word, I spent exactly 4 hours in the Ministry of Revenue's archives, tore their fraudulent ledgers to shreds with a red ink brush, and located the emperor's missing 600,000 silver taels. True to his word, the emperor had a heavily guarded carriage deliver my 5% finder's fee, 30,000 taels of pure silver, directly to the western courtyard. I was currently in the process of auditing the delivery. 29,990, 30,000, I muttered, sliding the final heavy silver ingot into my newly acquired, reinforced iron lockbox. I snapped the heavy brass padlock shut and patted the lid affectionately. Excellent. We are officially halfway to my severance goal. Bao and Chui were standing in the corner of the room, staring at the iron lockbox with the kind of reverent terror usually reserved for local deities. They had gone from serving the estate's most pathetic exile to working for the wealthiest woman in the compound. Before I could instruct them on the proper protocols for guarding my retirement fund, the heavy wooden doors of the courtyard swung open. General Wei Chen has arrived, a guard announced. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Again. Over the past 3 days, the terrifying, battle-hardened commander of the Northern Army had suddenly developed a severe case of micromanagement. He had visited the Western Courtyard more times this week than he had in the entire previous year. Wei Chen strode into my office wearing deep sapphire robes trimmed with silver, looking incredibly imposing and entirely too handsome for 9 o'clock in the morning. He wasn't flanked by his usual intimidating lieutenants. Instead, he was carrying a polished wooden box. Bao and Chui immediately dropped to their knees, pressing their foreheads to the floorboards. You may leave us, Wei Chen said, his deep voice dismissing them instantly. The 2 servants scrambled out of the room faster than a tax evader fleeing an audit. I didn't stand. I simply leaned back in my oak chair and crossed my arms. General, to what do I owe this unprecedented morning intrusion? Is there another natural disaster I need to hedge against? No, Wei Chen said smoothly, walking up to my desk. He set the polished wooden box down directly in front of my abacus. I brought you a logistical asset. I eyed the box suspiciously. If it is another box of depreciating gold hairpins, I am going to charge you an appraisal fee. Open it, he challenged, the corner of his mouth twitching upwards. I leaned forward and popped the brass latch. Inside rested a massive, flawlessly carved Duan inkstone. It was a deep, rich purple-black, smooth as glass, with a natural stone grain that resembled swirling clouds. Beside it sat a set of 4 premium, wolf hair calligraphy brushes, their handles crafted from carved sandalwood. My accountant brain instantly calculated the market value. It was astronomical. A master-crafted Duan inkstone of this size was rarer than imperial jade. It was the ancient equivalent of being gifted a top-of-the-line, fully customized, water-cooled supercomputer. Oh, I breathed, my fingers lightly tracing the smooth surface of the stone. This is highly efficient. I noticed you were grinding your ink unevenly with the standard stones. Wei Chen said casually, pulling up a chair and sitting directly across from me. This stone retains moisture. It will keep your ink fluid for hours during your aggressive accounting sessions. Thank you, General. It is a highly practical capital expenditure, I said, genuinely pleased. I carefully closed the box and moved it to a safe corner of my desk. Then, I picked up my pen and looked at him expectantly. He didn't move. He just sat there, resting one arm on the armrest, his dark, intense eyes watching me with unwavering focus. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. Then 20. General, I finally said, tapping my brush against my rice paper. Was there something else? Because I am currently running a depreciation analysis on your cavalry saddles, and I charge by the hour. I am observing the workflow of my estate's chief logistical officer. Wei Chen replied smoothly, entirely unbothered by my glare. Please continue. Ignore me. Ignore the most terrifying warlord in the empire, sitting 3 feet away from my abacus. I deadpanned. Right. Extremely conducive to a productive work environment. I tried to ignore him. I pulled up the leather and iron expenditure reports and began inputting the numbers on my suin pan. Clack, clack, clack. But the sheer gravity of his presence was infuriating. I could feel his gaze tracking every movement of my hands, analyzing the speed of my fingers on the wooden beads, watching the way I aggressively crossed out Master Wang's erroneous math. He wasn't looking at me with the cold disdain from the novel. He was looking at me like I was the most fascinating military strategy he had ever encountered. Your ledger technique, Wei Chen suddenly rumbled, leaning forward and invading my personal workspace. You categorize expenditures differently than the Ministry of Revenue. You separate the structural assets from the daily rations. Because grouping them together is a catastrophic analytical failure, I snapped, momentarily distracted by the scent of sandalwood and crisp winter air rolling off his robes. A warhorse is a depreciating asset. A sack of rice is a consumable expense. If you put them in the same column, you artificially inflate your net worth. Wei Chen's eyes darkened with that familiar, intense hunger for knowledge. He stood up, walking around the desk until he was standing directly behind my chair. He leaned down, resting his hands on the desk on either side of me, effectively trapping me in my seat. Show me, he murmured, his breath brushing against my ear. My pulse spiked, executing a completely unauthorized jump in my throat. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to look down at the rice paper instead of the devastatingly sharp angle of his jaw. I draw a T account. I managed to say, my voice lacking its usual crisp authority. I pointed a slightly trembling finger at the grid. Credits on the right, debits on the left. The sum of the 2 columns must always equal 0. If it doesn't, someone is stealing from you. Fascinating, Wei Chen whispered. He wasn't looking at the ledger. He was looking at the side of my neck. General, I breathed, my professional boundaries rapidly crumbling under the weight of his proximity. According to your original decree, I am banished to the cold palace. You explicitly stated I was not to seek you out. You didn't seek me out, Wei Chen pointed out, his deep voice vibrating against my shoulder. I sought you out. Therefore, I am not in violation of my own decree. That is a severe legal loophole, I argued weakly. I am a tactician, Lin Yao. I exploit weaknesses, he murmured. He slowly straightened up, his hand briefly, gently brushing my shoulder as he stepped back. I will leave you to your calculations. But expect me tomorrow. I have a sudden, pressing need to audit the armory budgets. He turned and strode out of the western courtyard, leaving me staring blindly at my ledger, my heart racing, and my meticulously planned divorce settlement suddenly feeling like a very, very bad investment. Chapter 8. Diversification is the first rule of asset management. By the time the first snows of winter began to dust the curved eaves of the Way estate, my severance fund was looking incredibly healthy. Between the Emperor's 30,000 tailfinder's fee and my 20% cut of the military supply savings, I was sitting on a highly liquid fortune. But cash uninvested is cash wasted to inflation. I needed a high-yield venture, and I had found the perfect one. The Northern Silk Trade. I was sitting in my heated courtyard, sipping premium oolong tea, and tracking the latest commodities index one had compiled from local merchant gossip. Bao was standing by the door, bundled in a thick fur coat, holding a stack of shipping manifests. The raw silk we purchased from the southern weavers has been dyed and loaded onto the wagons, madam, Bao reported, his teeth chattering slightly. The newly incorporated Golden Abacus Trading Company is officially ready for its inaugural northern expedition. Excellent work, Bao. The northern nomadic tribes pay an astronomical markup for winter weight silk. Our profit margins on this single shipment will exceed 300%, I said, making a final notation on my ledger. Have the mercenary escorts been briefed on the route? Before Bao could answer, the courtyard doors swung open with a heavy thud. General Wei Chen strode into the courtyard. He was dressed in his winter martial gear. A heavy dire wolf fur cloak draped over his broad shoulders, making him look like a terrifying, ancient warlord. He marched straight up to my desk and dropped a rolled-up piece of parchment directly on top of my ledger. You are running a shadow corporation out of my cold palace, Wei Chen stated, his deep voice carrying a dangerous edge. I didn't flinch. I picked up the parchment. It was the heavily redacted shipping manifest for my silk caravan, complete with the fake merchant seal I had commissioned in the city. It's not a shadow corporation, General. It is a fully independent limited liability company. I corrected smoothly, rolling the parchment back up. I used my own severance funds as startup capital. It has absolutely zero impact on the estate's operational budget. Wei Chen pulled up a chair, sitting down so close our knees nearly brushed under the desk. He leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest, his dark eyes fixed entirely on me. I am the military governor of this province, Lin Yao. I sign off on all major trade routes, he said. When I saw a massive, heavily funded merchant caravan filing permits under a company name I didn't recognize, operating out of a warehouse entirely populated by my own estate's off-duty servants, I naturally conducted an investigation. I see the estate's counterintelligence division is finally earning its payroll, I noted dryly. Are you here to tax me, General? I am here to tell you that your logistics are flawed, he replied. I froze, my pen hovering over the inkstone. I could handle threats. I could handle political sabotage. But an insult to my logistics was a declaration of war. Excuse me? I demanded, my eyes narrowing. My supply chain is flawless. The wagons are fully winterized, the draft horses are heavily vetted, and the markup is perfectly aligned with northern market scarcity. Your target market is sound. Your security detail is not, Wei Chen said, leaning forward. He tapped a long, callous finger against the manifest. You hired the Iron Shield Mercenary Guild. They are cheap, but they are terrified of the Black Wind bandits who control the northern mountain passes. The moment your caravans hit the snow line, the bandits will ambush them, the mercenaries will flee, and you will lose 100% of your inventory. I stared at him, my mind rapidly calculating the catastrophic risk of total inventory loss. The insurance premiums for a northern expedition were practically non-existent in this dynasty. If the caravan was raided, I absorbed the entire financial hit. Shrinkage, I whispered in horror. Total asset liquidation, Wei Chen corrected, his eyes gleaming with dark amusement at my sudden distress. I leaned back in my chair, pinching the bridge of my nose. Damn it. I need that profit margin to hit my Q4 projections. I can't reroute them. The southern markets are entirely saturated. If the mercenaries are unreliable, I'll have to hire a private militia, which will completely destroy my overhead costs. You don't need to hire a militia, Wei Chen said softly. I opened my eyes looking at him. The terrifying general was watching me with an expression of intense, unwavering devotion that completely contradicted his warlord aesthetic. He looked at me the way a dragon looks at its hoard. The northern mountain passes fall under my military jurisdiction. Wei Chen continued, his voice dropping into a low, rumbling register. My elite shadow cavalry requires live target training exercises to stay sharp during the winter months. Escorting a high-value silk caravan through bandit territory provides the perfect training scenario. My jaw dropped slightly. You want to use the Imperial Army to escort my private silk monopoly? I want to protect my co-chief executive officer's investments, he corrected smoothly, quoting the corporate terminology I had used on him weeks ago. The military escorts are completely free of charge. No overhead costs. No inventory serinki. My accountant brain immediately recognized the sheer, unparalleled value of what he was offering. Having the Empire's most feared cavalry guard my shipments meant a guaranteed, unassailable monopoly. But in the corporate world, nothing was truly free. What is your consulting fee, General? I asked suspiciously. You wouldn't offer me a military-grade security contract without demanding a percentage of the gross. Wei Chen's signature, predatory smirk slowly curved his lips. He leaned across the desk, completely ignoring the boundaries of my personal workspace, until his face was inches from mine. I don't want your silver, Yao, he murmured, his breath warm against my cheek. My consulting fee is time. Specifically dinner. Every evening. Right here in the western courtyard. I blinked, my heart executing a frantic, highly unauthorized drum solo against my ribs. In the original web novel, Lin Yao had spent months kneeling in the snow, begging for a single meal with this man. Now he was leveraging a military strike force just to get a seat at my dining table. Dinner, I repeated, trying to maintain my crisp, professional composure while his intense proximity was actively short-circuiting my brain. That is a severe disruption to my evening auditing schedule. I will help you audit, Wei Chen promised, his gaze dropping to my lips. I have become highly proficient with the Suanpan. I looked at the military commander who was currently trying to bribe me into a date using a private army and accounting assistance. It was, objectively, the most romantic corporate negotiation I had ever experienced. Fine, I breathed, picking up my brush to hide the slight tremor in my hand. Contract accepted. Dinner is at 7. If you are late, I am locking the courtyard doors. I am never late, Wei Chen whispered, his eyes burning with absolute triumph. Prepare the ledgers, madam. We have an empire to run. Chapter 9. By the time the Lunar New Year approached, my evening dinner contract with General Wei Chen had evolved from a tactical corporate negotiation into a highly disruptive daily routine. Every night at 7 o'clock, the terrifying warlord of the Northern Territories would arrive at the Western Courtyard. We would eat dinner, and then he would casually pull his chair to my side of the desk, roll up his silk sleeves, and help me audit the provincial tax returns until midnight. It was domestic, it was highly productive, and my heart rate was in a constant state of elevated panic. Unfortunately, our optimized operational flow was about to be interrupted by the most dreaded of all historical romance tropes. The White Lotus cousin. I was in the middle of calculating Q1 projections for the Silk Route when Bao burst into the courtyard, completely ignoring my strict, knock before entering policy. Madam, a crisis of the highest order, Bao gasped, looking like he was about to faint. The general's distant cousin, Lady Rulon, has arrived from the capital. She brought 3 carriages of luggage and a letter from the dowager aunt. She is here to offer herself as a secondary wife, to warm the general's bed, and provide him with the tender affection you supposedly deny him. In the original web novel, Lady Rulon was the primary antagonist of the second arc. She was a master of courtyard politics, constantly staging fainting spells, framing Lin Yao for poisoning her tea, and crying elegantly into silk handkerchiefs. The original Lin Yao had spent months throwing jealous tantrums over her, which only drove Wei Chen further away. I set my calligraphy brush down, letting out a deep, long-suffering sigh. Bao, I do not have the bandwidth for a hostile HR situation today. I muttered, rubbing my temples. Where is the general? He is inspecting the cavalry barracks, madam. Lady Rulon went straight to the main pavilion, but when she found it empty, she demanded to be brought here. She says she wishes to pay her respects to the principal wife. She's right outside. Right on cue, the courtyard doors were pushed open. Lady Rulon stepped over the threshold. She was a vision of fragile, trembling beauty, draped in layers of pale pink silk that made her look like a delicate cherry blossom. She was flanked by 2 haughty maids. She took one look at my minimalist, highly functional office setup, the towering stacks of bamboo scrolls, the massive inkstone, the complete lack of decorative flowers, and a smug, victorious smile flashed across her face before she quickly masked it with a look of demure innocence. "Sister Yao," Roland said, her voice a sickly sweet, high-pitched chirp. She offered a shallow, highly disrespectful bow. "I apologize for the intrusion. My mother sent me to ease the general's burdens. I know you prefer the isolation of the cold palace, so I have come to take over the management of the inner courtyard and serve the general's more intimate needs." She paused, waiting for my reaction. She was bracing for tears. She was ready for me to scream, throw a teacup, or order my guards to strike her, which she could then use to play the victim when Wei Chen returned. Instead, I looked at her, my accountant brain rapidly assessing her utility. "Unpaid labor." "Roland," I said brightly, standing up from my desk. "Your timing is absolutely impeccable. I have been telling the general we are severely understaffed in the mid-level management sector." Roland blinked, her delicate, painted eyebrows furrowing in confusion. "Understaffed?" "Exactly," I said, walking around my desk. I grabbed a massive, incredibly heavy stack of bamboo scrolls from the pending pile, walked over to the terrified girl, and dumped the entire stack directly into her fragile, pink silk-draped arms. Roland let out an ungraceful oof as the weight of 30 pounds of military tax records hit her chest. "Welcome to the logistics department," I announced cheerfully, ignoring her maid's horrified gasps. "If you want to live in this estate and eat our overhead budget, you have to contribute to the gross domestic product. I am delegating the Western livestock depreciation ledgers to you." Roland swayed under the weight of the scrolls, her delicate facade completely shattering. The livestock what? "Sister Yao, I am here to play the lute for the general. I am here to compose poetry by the lotus pond." "There is no lotus pond, we paved it over to build a secondary grain silo," I corrected smoothly. "And lute music doesn't balance the quarterly margins. Now, I need you to calculate the feed-to-weight ratio for 3,000 cavalry horses, cross-reference it against the winter oat prices, and find the discrepancies in Master Wang's rounding errors. I expect a preliminary report by sundown tomorrow." "Sundown tomorrow?" Roland shrieked, dropping her demure act entirely. "I don't know how to read a tax ledger. I am a noblewoman." "Then I suggest you learn quickly, or I am putting you on a performance improvement plan," I threatened, my voice dropping into my terrifying, corporate shark register. I reached into my sleeve, pulled out a spare abacus, and slapped it on top of the scrolls she was holding. "Bow! Escort our new intern to the unheated eastern storage room. Tell her she doesn't get dinner until the debits and credits match." You can't do this," Roland stammered, tears of actual, unfeigned terror welling in her eyes. "When the general hears of this jealousy, when he sees how cruelly you treat his family, the general fully supports my HR policies," a dark, rumbling voice echoed from the courtyard entrance. Roland froze. I looked up. General Wei Chen was leaning casually against the doorframe, his arms crossed over his armored chest. He had clearly been standing there long enough to witness the entire exchange. Roland immediately dropped the heavy scrolls. They crashed to the floor with a deafening clatter, and fell to her knees, looking up at him with wide, weeping eyes. "Cousin," she sobbed, perfectly executing the damsel in distress routine. "Protect me. Your wife has gone mad. She is forcing me to do manual peasant labor. She wants me to count horse feed." Wei Chen didn't even look at her. His icy, dark eyes were locked entirely on me. The corner of his mouth was twitching upward in a devastatingly handsome, deeply arrogant smirk. He stepped over the pile of fallen scrolls, walked straight past his weeping cousin, and stopped in front of my desk. "She dropped the livestock ledgers," Wei Chen murmured, reaching out to gently tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear, his knuckles brushing warmly against my cheek. "That is a severe violation of estate protocol. Should we fire her?" Instantly, I breathed, my pulse racing at his touch. Her KPI metrics are abysmal. Wei Chen finally turned his head to look down at his terrified cousin. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by the absolute zero temperature of the god of war. "You heard the co-CEO," Wei Chen said coldly. "You are fired. Pack your carriages and return to the capital immediately. And if you or your mother ever attempt to disrupt my wife's workflow again, I will personally audit your family's estate." Lady Roland didn't faint. She let out a highly undignified squeak of terror, scrambled to her feet, and bolted out of the courtyard, leaving her maids scrambling to chase after her. As the courtyard doors slammed shut behind them, leaving us in a quiet domestic silence, I let out a long breath and looked up at the terrifying warlord who had just banished his own flesh and blood to protect my accounting schedule. "Well," I noted, trying to steady my heart rate, "that was highly efficient." "I told you," Wei Chen whispered, leaning down until his lips were a breath away from mine. "I am a very supportive business partner." Chapter 10. By the middle of the winter solstice, the western courtyard was completely snowed in. Outside, a brutal blizzard was howling, burying the stone pathways and the depressing willow tree under 2 feet of white powder. Inside, however, my office was a sanctuary of warmth and high-level strategic planning. 3 brass braziers burned premium, smokeless charcoal, and the scent of freshly brewed dark tea filled the air. It was past midnight. I was hunched over the massive oak desk, staring at a topographical map of the Chilean mountains. I was attempting to chart a secondary, covert supply route for a shipment of heavy siege ballistas that Wei Chen needed moved to the northern vanguard. I was also attempting, and severely failing, to ignore the man sitting right next to me. General Wei Chen had long since abandoned the pretense of auditing the armory budgets. He was currently lounging in the chair beside mine, having discarded his heavy outer furs and armor hours ago. He was wearing only a dark, close-fitting silk inner robe that left the strong lines of his chest and throat entirely exposed. He was leaning heavily on his elbow, his dark, mesmerizing eyes tracking the movement of my brush across the map. He was entirely too close. The heat radiating off his body was actively interfering with my cognitive functions. "Your breathing," I said, my voice sounding a fraction less crisp than usual, "is currently disrupting my logistical calculations." "My breathing," Wei Chen rumbled, "not moving an inch, is perfectly steady. It is your pulse that is erratic, Yao. I can see the vein jumping in your neck." My hand slipped, leaving a tiny smear of black ink in the middle of a mountain range. I gritted my teeth and set the brush down on the Duan inkstone. If my pulse is erratic, it is due to the sheer stress of trying to route 2-ton siege weapons through a blizzard without alerting the northern spies. I lied smoothly, turning my head to glare at him. Wei Chen didn't smile. The playful, arrogant smirk that usually accompanied our banter was gone. His face was entirely serious, his jaw set in a tight, tense line. He reached across the desk, completely ignoring the topographical map, and laid his large, warm hand directly over my suan pan, stopping my fingers from reaching for the wooden beads. "We need to discuss the contract," Wei Chen stated softly. My accountant brain immediately went on high alert. "The severance package? General, if you are attempting to default on my 20% cut because the fiscal year is ending, I will legally seize your cavalry and sell them to the highest bidder." "I don't care about the silver, Yao. You can have the entire imperial treasury," he murmured, his fingers sliding off the abacus to gently encircle my wrist. "I am talking about Clause 4. The golden parachute. The mutual dissolution of marriage." The room suddenly felt incredibly quiet. The howling of the blizzard outside seemed to fade into the background. "What about it?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. Wei Chen stood up. He didn't let go of my wrist. He gently tugged, pulling me up out of my chair until I was standing directly in front of him. The sheer overwhelming height and presence of the man swallowed me completely. "When you first presented that contract," Wei Chen said, his voice a low, vibrating hum in the quiet room, "I signed it because I thought you were a temporary political inconvenience. I thought you would last a month before begging to return to the capital. But then you restructured my army." He took a step closer, erasing the last fraction of space between us. His free hand came up, his long, callous fingers gently cupping my jaw, tilting my face up so I had no choice but to look into his burning, icy blue eyes. "You are the most ruthless, brilliant, utterly terrifying creature I have ever encountered," Wei Chen breathed, his thumb tracing the line of my cheekbone. "You are my equal in every single way. And the thought of you taking your silver, dissolving this marriage, and leaving me in the spring to run a silk monopoly in Jiangnan is completely, entirely unacceptable." My heart slammed against my ribs. I had successfully predicted market fluctuations, engineered supply chains, and outmaneuvered the emperor's court. But I had no spreadsheet for the profound, overwhelming terror of actually being loved by the god of war. Wei Chen, I whispered, my analytical defenses shattering entirely. I am a businesswoman. I don't know how to be a traditional wife. I don't compose poetry. I don't embroider. I will probably end up auditing your household budget until we die. I don't want a traditional wife, Wei Chen replied fiercely, his hand tightening slightly on my jaw. I want my co-CEO. I want the woman who threatens my stewards and balances my ledgers in the middle of the night. I want to renegotiate the terms of our merger. Renegotiate. I breathed. What are your new terms? A permanent acquisition, Wei Chen murmured, his gaze dropping to my lips. No exit clause. No severance package. Just you, me, and an empire to run. Before I could calculate the risk-to-reward ratio of surrendering my retirement plan, Wei Chen leaned down and kissed me. It wasn't a gentle, hesitant courtyard romance kiss. It was a hostile takeover. It was demanding, consuming, and entirely possessive, sweeping away the last remnants of my corporate armor. When he finally broke the kiss, we were both breathing heavily. Our foreheads rest. Clause 4 is officially void, I whispered shakily, my eyes fluttering open to meet his triumphant, burning gaze. Agreed, Wei Chen rumbled, a slow, devastatingly genuine smile spreading across his face. He wrapped his arms entirely around me, burying his face in my hair. Now, Madame Yao, let us return to the map. We have siege weapons to rout, and I intend to conquer the rest of this continent for you by summer. Chapter 11. The arrival of spring brought the thawing of the northern mountain passes, a massive influx of Q1 revenue from my silk monopoly, and a warrant for my husband's execution. I was sitting in the newly expanded Sunlit Logistics Pavilion. I had outgrown the western courtyard and formally seized the estate's main administrative building, when Bao sprinted into the room, tripping over the threshold. Madame Yao! Bao shrieked, waving a scroll stamped with the golden imperial seal. Treason! The Imperial Guard is here. They are demanding the general return to the capital to face the emperor. I calmly finished tallying a column on my suanpan before looking up. Treason is a very strong accusation, Bao. It also carries a severe penalty regarding asset seizure. Who is the plaintiff? General Lan, the commander of the Eastern Army, Bao cried, practically tearing his hair out. He claims General Wei Chen has been embezzling imperial military funds for the past 2 years to secretly fund a private rebellion. He presented the emperor with confidential ledgers as proof. I stared at Bao, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face. Forging a military ledger to frame the empire's greatest warlord? That was standard historical drama politics. Attempting to present fraudulent accounting to me. The woman who had personally audited every single grain of rice in the Wei estate down to the 5th decimal point? That was financial suicide. Where is Wei Chen? I asked, standing up and smoothing my dark plum silk robes. He is already in the courtyard with the Imperial Guards, Bao whimpered. He told me to tell you to stay here, protect the assets, and that he would handle it. Absolutely not. This is a hostile corporate sabotage, and I am the co-CEO, I declared, marching toward the door. Hui, Bao, hitch the heavy transport wagons. We are going to the capital, and we are bringing the filing cabinets. 3 hours later, the Grand Hall of Supreme Harmony was a powder keg of political tension. The emperor sat on his golden throne, looking grim. Standing in the center of the hall was Wei Chen, stripped of his weapons but radiating an aura of terrifying, unbothered calm. Across from him stood General Han, a weasel-faced man practically vibrating with smug victory. The evidence is irrefutable, Your Majesty, General Han proclaimed, pointing dramatically to a stack of bamboo scrolls on a table. These ledgers, recovered from a defecting quartermaster, show that General Wei Chen diverted 300,000 silver taels from the winter supply budget to purchase illegal siege weaponry. The emperor looked down at Wei Chen. General Wei, what do you have to say to these expenditures? Wei Chen didn't look at the emperor. He looked over his shoulder, toward the massive red doors of the Grand Hall. I have nothing to say, Your Majesty, Wei Chen replied smoothly. My chief financial officer handles all external audits. Right on cue, I kicked the heavy oak doors open. The entire imperial court turned and stared as I strode into the Grand Hall, flanked by 4 Wei estate guards wheeling 2 massive, groaning wooden carts overflowing with neatly bound, color-coded bamboo scrolls. Apologies for the delay, Your Majesty, I announced, my voice echoing off the gold leaf pillars. Traffic on the Grand Canal was abhorrent. I hear we are discussing my husband's Q4 expenditures. General Fan Smux Mila Banisha. Lady Lin Yao, this is an imperial tribunal. Women are not permitted to. I am the legally recognized matriarch of the Wei estate, and the primary executor of its supply chain, General Han. Please sit down before you embarrass yourself. I snapped, completely ignoring imperial decorum. I marched straight past him and stopped beside Wei Chen. Wei Chen looked down at me, his dark eyes gleaming with absolute, arrogant pride. You brought the filing cabinets. I brought the receipts, I murmured back. I turned my attention to the emperor, offering a crisp, professional bow. Your Majesty, General Han claims my husband embezzled 300,000 taels. May I examine his irrefutable ledgers? The emperor, who still remembered the last time I had done math in this room, nervously waved his hand in permission. I walked over to Han's table, unrolled the top scroll, and scanned the vertical columns of numbers. It took my modern accountant brain exactly 4 seconds to spot the glaring, structural flaws in the forged single-entry system. I let out a sharp, genuine laugh. It was a terrifying sound in the silent hall. General Han, I said, dropping the scroll back onto the table with a look of profound disgust. A forged ledger is like a bad toupee. It only looks convincing if you don't examine the roots. This math is an insult to my profession. How dare you? Han sputtered, his face turning purple. Those are authentic quartermaster records. They are fiction, I corrected loudly. I gestured to my guards, who immediately began unloading my color-coded scrolls. Your Majesty, General Han's forged ledgers claim Wei Chen diverted funds from the winter grain supply. But as these actual, double-entry audited records show, Wei Chen didn't use imperial funds to buy grain last winter. We bought the grain using our own private budget, purchased at a fixed wholesale. The emperor leaned forward, his eyes widening. Furthermore, I continued, pulling my suan pan from my sleeve and slamming it down on the table next to the forged scrolls. Clack, clack, clack. General Han's forgery includes a line item for 3,000 bolts of winter canvas. But he priced the canvas at the capital's retail rate of 5 taels a bolt. The Wei estate operates on a direct-to-manufacturer pipeline. We pay 2.5 taels a bolt. Whoever forged this ledger didn't have access to our wholesale discount codes. General Han began to sweat profusely. That proves nothing. The silver is still missing from the imperial treasury. Oh, I know where the silver is. I smiled, a cold, predatory expression that made several nearby ministers take a physical step back. I walked over to my second cart and pulled out a scroll tied with a red ribbon. Since I was already doing an audit on the way here, I decided to run a cross-referencing analysis on the Eastern Army's supply routes, I announced, unrolling the scroll and holding it up for the emperor to see. General Han claims Wei Chen bought illegal siege weapons. The silence in the Grand Hall was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. I turned slowly to face the trembling General Han. You didn't frame my husband to cover up his treason, Han, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You framed him to cover a massive, sloppy margin call on your own embezzlement scheme. And you used terrible math to do it. Guards, the emperor bellowed, his face turning a furious shade of red. Sis generalan. As the guards dragged the screaming, thrashing general out of the hall, I calmly rolled my scroll back up and turned to the emperor. Your Majesty, I said pleasantly, since I just saved the Ministry of Justice a 6-month investigation, I will be forwarding my standard consulting invoice to the Imperial Treasury. We accept solid silver taels. The emperor stared at me, looking slightly terrified. Just leave the invoice with the steward, Lady Lin. I offered a flawless bow and turned back to Wei Chen. The god of war was looking at me with an expression of such intense, overwhelming devotion it practically set the air on fire. He didn't care that we were in the middle of the imperial court. He reached out, wrapping his hand securely around my waist and pulling me flush against his side. My wife, gentlemen, Wei Chen announced to the stunned, silent court, his voice vibrating with arrogant triumph. The most dangerous weapon in the Northern Army. Chapter 12. 3 weeks after our triumphant return from the capital, the Wei estate was functioning at peak operational efficiency. The hostile takeover of the northern silk routes was complete, the imperial consulting fees had cleared, and my private ledger had finally hit a highly significant milestone. I was sitting in the command pavilion, sipping a cup of premium Longjing tea. Sitting directly across from me at the Obsidian War table was General Wei Qin. He was reviewing troop deployment reports, looking devastatingly handsome in his dark, silver-threaded robes. I reached into my sleeve and pulled out a familiar, heavily worn bamboo scroll. I set it on the table between us. Wei Qin paused, his dark eyes dropping to the scroll. He recognized it instantly. It was the original temporary restructuring and severance agreement we had signed during my first week in the Cold Palace. General, I said, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms. We have a lingering administrative issue. I ran the final Q2 numbers this morning. My 20% cut of the estate savings, combined with the silk monopoly revenue and the Emperor's consulting fees, has officially surpassed 100,000 silver taels. Wei Qin's jaw tightened. The easy, arrogant calm he had been exuding all morning vanished, replaced by a sudden, intense stillness. The severance threshold, Wei Qin murmured, his eyes locking onto mine. Exactly, I said smoothly. According to Clause 4 of this legally binding document, the moment my account hits 100,000 taels, the contract triggers. You are required to sign a letter of repudiation, and I am contractually obligated to pack my jade and relocate to Jiangnan. Wei Qin didn't say a word. He stood up from the war table, his sheer size casting a long shadow across the topographical maps. He walked slowly around the edge of the obsidian surface until he was standing right beside my chair. He reached down and picked up the bamboo scroll. In the novel, this was the moment of ultimate tragedy. The heroine would be banished, weeping as she was driven away in a lonely carriage, hoping the general would chase after her. Wei Qin didn't look sad. He looked murderous. Without breaking eye contact with me, the terrifying commander of the Northern Army turned and walked over to the blazing brass brazier heating the pavilion. He tossed the physical contract directly into the flames. The dry bamboo caught instantly, crackling and popping as my meticulously drafted severance agreement was reduced to white ash. Clause 4, Wei Qin said, his voice a low, vibrating rumble that sent a highly unprofessional shiver down my spine, has been permanently liquidated. That was a legally notarized document, General, I pointed out, though I was failing entirely to suppress the smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. Destroying it is a severe breach of corporate compliance. I am the law in this province, Yao, he stated smoothly, walking back to me. He leaned down, resting his hands on the armrests of my chair, completely trapping me in his space. His icy blue eyes burned with a dark, territorial fire. And my co-CEO is not relocating anywhere. The temporary merger is over. We are executing a permanent acquisition. He reached into his heavy silk sleeve and pulled out something incredibly heavy. He set it down gently on the desk right in front of me. It was a solid block of flawless, dark green imperial jade, intricately carved in the shape of a coiled dragon. The base was stained with red cinnabar ink. My breath caught in my throat. I recognized it immediately. It was the Wei clan's supreme military and financial seal. It represented absolute control over the Northern Army, the provincial taxes, and the general's entire life. I don't want a divorce, Wei Qin whispered, his face inches from mine, his thumb gently tracing the line of my jaw. I want a monopoly. Take the seal, Lin Yao. Command my estate. Command my army. Command me. I looked at the priceless jade seal, and then up at the man who had completely surrendered his icy, warlord persona to become the most devoted business partner in history. My heart did a frantic, joyous leap against my ribs. Well, I breathed, wrapping my arms around his neck and pulling him down. I suppose I can cancel my relocation plans. The overhead costs of moving to Jiangnan were going to be atrocious anyway. When he kissed me, the last remaining walls of my corporate armor dissolved entirely, leaving only the thrilling, undeniable reality that I had successfully engineered the greatest merger of my life. Epilogue. For years later, the Wei estate was no longer just a military compound. It was the most terrifyingly optimized, highly profitable economic powerhouse in the entire empire. I was sitting in my heavily renovated, luxurious western courtyard, which was now universally recognized as the true capital of the northern provinces. I was wearing a sweeping robe of crimson silk, clicking my rosewood abacus with terrifying speed as I reviewed the annual tax returns. Outside on the sunlit veranda, my two toddlers, a boy and a girl, were currently attempting to use a stack of blank bamboo ledgers as building blocks. Bao, who had been promoted to chief of operations, hurried into the courtyard, bowing deeply. Madam Yao, General Wei Chun, Bao announced, stepping aside. Wei Chun strode into the courtyard, looking exactly as imposing and handsome as he had 4 years ago, though the icy glare he used to strike terror into his enemies melted the second he saw the children. He scooped our daughter up into one arm and walked over to my desk, leaning down to press a kiss to the top of my head. "How are the Q3 margins?" my fearsome warlord husband asked casually, peering over my shoulder at the spreadsheet. "We are up 40% year-over-year," I replied, making a final notation and setting my brush down. "Though we received another letter from the Dowager Aunt in the capital this morning. Apparently, the aristocratic women are deeply concerned that you only have 2 children and no secondary wives to manage your household." Wei Chun's dark eyebrows shot up. He snorted in absolute derision. "Tell the Dowager Aunt that my household is managed by a financial genius who could bankrupt her entire lineage before breakfast," Wei Chun rumbled, adjusting his grip on our giggling daughter. "Furthermore, tell her that our current heir-to-asset ratio is flawless. 2 children are a perfectly balanced portfolio. Any more would unnecessarily dilute our resources." I burst out laughing, leaning back in my chair and looking up at him. "You've been studying the corporate glossary I wrote for you." "I am a dedicated co-CEO," Wei Chun murmured, his eyes shining with that familiar, intense devotion. He set our daughter down to play with her brother, then rounded the desk, pulling me up out of my chair and into his arms. "Leave the ledgers, madam," he whispered, pressing a kiss to the side of my neck. "The empire can run itself for an hour. Your business partner requires your undivided attention." I smiled, wrapping my arms around him and resting my head against his chest. I had woken up in this ancient, dramatic world expecting a tragedy. Instead, I had executed a flawless hostile takeover, secured an absolute monopoly, and found a love that defied all statistical probability. The abacus was put away for the day. The Wei estate's assets were perfectly secure. And frankly, business was booming.